So, the final reading assignment for English 23 isn't actually a reading assignment at all. Yes, at the end there are a couple, I guess 5 web pages I want you to read. But other than that, it's really kind of an opportunity for you to experiment. And what I mean by that is what I want you to do is look at an online carbon footprint calculator. There are a number of these out there. You may have seen some. You may have actually seen this one. This one is interesting because in addition to giving your results in the amount of metric tons of emissions that your lifestyle has, it also gives it to you in hectares or the amount of land that it would take to support your lifestyle. And also, and I think most notably in this case, in the number of Earths that it would take. In other words, we have just one Earth. So the ideal situation, if we can, dial down our climate footprint so, we could support our world population, with just one Earth. Right now it takes, like 1.6 Earths to do it. Globally, you can see the problem. And for many people, probably a lot of us in the developed world, high wealthy countries, the footprint it would actually take more Earths than that, many Earths to do it. So let me show you how the calculator works, and I'll show you what I would like to do here for the assignment. So first jump in, and here it is, and you just hit this. Take the first step here, and that will pop you to here. And all you have to do is go through and change these sliders. But this gives you an option here, and whenever you have it, not every page has it, but you can add details here. So, how often do you eat beef? You can change this here in specific details. So we're talking about animal products. How about pork, poultry, fish, and eggs and cheese. So it has a good bit of precision here. Now, all of the online calculators, well, none of them are perfect. So I would have liked to have seen, for example, a calculator that also had food waste on there, but it is not available in this calculator. And they also don't deal with things like population. And actually, if you poke around on their website, they have a page talking about population and people talking about why it's sort of controversial. And I understand, but it doesn't give as clear a picture as you might like in some ways, but does have other things that we haven't talked much about, and this is, for example, if you eat locally or not, and you can go into detail here whether you have, packaged food, locally grown. Given that the average fruit or vegetable travels 1,500 miles to get to us, this is important, but arguably, well, not arguably, but not as important, for example, as, food waste. How important is the difference? Well, you can experiment here by playing around with things like this. Some of these won't be as useful for you because I imagine most of you are students, you're living in student housing or things, but maybe not. But you really can't, change things like, making your house out of straw rather than concrete or steel, which is huge, by the way. So there is something called straw bale construction. People build their houses that way. Concrete, we don't often think about, but concrete is, 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the manufacture of concrete, another 2 or 3% from the manufacture of steel. So these things do matter, but again, there may not be things that you can change. But go through these, type of electricity you have, and, this will explain it here, above average, efficient central design and so forth. Some of these, again, you may not even know about, but some that you may know, renewable sources here. The trash one is interesting because it doesn't actually ask you about how many things you consume, but on the other hand, kind of, as we saw with Vance Packard and the waste makers, it's about the waste in some ways. So how much of your monthly, your closet comes closest to your monthly new clothing, footwear, or sporting goods purchases. So if you happen to buy a lot here, this is where you note that if you buy a lot, or if you don't buy very much at all, it's where you note here. So that's actually purchases, even though it's in a section here regarding waste, home furnishings, appliances, and all. Some of these, again, may not matter that much to you, but Um, Traveling, again, you may not do that much as a student, but you may. It talks about the vehicles that you have. Carpooling it doesn't talk about, for example, bicycling here and other things I would have liked to have broken down into greater detail, but it's okay. Public transportation, important. Flying, this one may matter, and you can fly here, and it goes way up here to 200 hours, but you may travel a lot. You may travel 10-hour flights round trip, which would be 20 hours. You may make 5 of those in a year. That would be 100. This is something to play about. If you have the opportunity, you can hit learn more here, and this will bring pop-ups to give you more information about it. But this is our last one here, and what it will do, this one having been run, is how many Earths it would take to sustain a human population if everyone did the same exact thing. You can do it show it in Earths, but you can also go here, and they will first give you a nice breakdown of the categories so that you could see if something like food is particularly large for you, mobility, and this would be transportation. Again, if you were the person I just said who was in an airplane 100 hours a year, this would be, very high by comparison. But it also then lets you see it in terms of your carbon footprint, in terms of tons of CO2 emissions. This is generally the way we look at it here, and this is 9.7 tons. The average American, depending on how it's calculated, is somewhere between 16 and 20 tons of CO2 a year. And this also puts it in terms of hectares, which, if you're not familiar with that unit of measurement, it's like 2.5 acres. So 5.7 here would be something like, around 13 acres. That's how many acres it would take to supply for each human being if we all had that sort of carbon footprint. Before you retake the test, and I'll talk about that in a moment, if you go to solutions here, it has 5 categories: city, energy, food, population, and planet. And if you click here, it'll open up a new tab, which I won't bother to do. And there's a page there that I'd like you to read because it goes into more detail about this, similar to Project Drawdown, but in different ways with different material. But then you have the option to retake the quiz, and you can just go ahead and walk through this again. So let me pop back on screen here if I can. So what I would like you to do is, after you run the quiz, and if you would write down how many Earths it would take and how many metric tons, so you have sort of a baseline, and then experiment. Just play around with this, and I'm not asking you to commit to making changes in your life. And I don't want this to become kind of like a shaming thing where some people make a comment saying, well, I have such a great lifestyle, it would just take, a fraction of an Earth if everyone lived the way I do. I don't want it to be that. What I really want is just for people to experiment, either with changes that you could make, changes that you have made, so you could go in and look and say, well, I became vegetarian, what difference did that make? Or, okay, I don't want to become a vegetarian. What if I just eliminate beef? What would that be? What would happen if I, didn't eliminate flying but cut it in half? What would happen if whatever? So the idea is just to play around with it and to learn a little more in more precision than we have. So I could have given you, and they actually have available here, data sets on all this, like Excel data spreadsheet, which they actually have here. But that would have been a kind of boring way to look at this data. This way is interactive and allows you to pinpoint things and see what changes happen if we make small changes to the way we live. And some of this may not apply to you now, but you may be interested in it in the future. So, for example, if you're planning on ultimately having a house, what difference would it make if you had solar on the house? If you decided not to go to a house, what would that be like in the other form of housing? Again, this isn't an ideal calculator because it would be great if it had more options about things like co-housing and all, but it's a pretty good one, and it's pretty useful. And hopefully you will use it and get some use out of it insofar as you can learn a little. After you do that, go online and make a comment about what you've learned here. That's kind of, what the class is about, becoming aware of the situation, learning, and, what you've learned, what surprised you, what didn't surprise you. it can be that, all that you didn't find any change that you could make, and, that's okay too. Again, I don't want it to be like a competition for who can have the biggest changes and all that. I want it to be an opportunity to learn, and you can do it with, some detail here. And you may run this 5 times or even 10 times. You can run it very quickly, by the way. You can just keep hitting that arrow and just go back to the page, say, for food, and keep changing. Okay, well, this time I'm going to take pork out of the equation. Will that make a difference? And you can do that, and it works pretty well. So play around with it, experiment, and then let us know what you learned, what you found interesting, what surprised you, what didn't surprise you, or whatever. So that should be the comment, and that's your reading assignment for this week. But do read when you get to the end those 5 pages, because there's some really interesting information on them. I think you'll find illuminating. Okay, so thanks a lot, and take care.